Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, usually when we start one of these, I have a pretty decent mental map of where we're going.
You got the landmarks, at least.
Exactly. If we talk about the heart, I know it pumps blood. If we talk about the stomach, okay, it digests food. Even with the brain, we're usually treading on somewhat familiar territory.
You mean the greatest hits? The prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus.
Right, the greatest hits. We talk about the prefrontal cortex and everyone nods and says, ah, yes, the CEO. We talk about the amygdala and everyone says, right, the fear center, the alarm bell. But today feels different. We're going somewhere that is quite literally hidden. We're journeying into the center of the brain, but to a place you just can't see from the outside. A place that was, for a very, very long time, just ignored.
It really was. It was dismissed. I mean, for decades, centuries even, it was just seen as this sort of primitive blob or honestly just too physically difficult to get to without damaging the rest of the brain.
So they just skipped it.
Researchers just they skipped it. It was easier to study the stuff on the surface.
Which is just wild to think about. We're talking about the insula, or to use its full kind of mysterious Indiana Jones-style name, the insular cortex.
It does have a good ring to it.
And looking at the history of this thing, it really does sound like an adventure novel. It was originally called The Island of Riehl.
That's right, named after Johann Christian Riehl, a German anatomist who first described it way, way back in 1809.
The Island of Riehl. It sounds like a place where you'd find a lost civilization or King Kong.
Right, a secret world.
But in reality, it's tucked away deep inside the lateral sulcus of your brain. And when I say hidden, I want to be really, really clear about this for anyone listening. If you hold a human brain in your hands, you cannot see this region.
No, you can't. It's completely subterranean. To even get a glimpse of the insula, you actually have to gently pull back these thick cortical layers, the layers of the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the temporal lobe.
So it's buried under other parts of the brain.
Exactly. Imagine these thick, heavy curtains made of brain tissue. These covers are technically called opercula, which is just Latin for lids. So the insula is this secret island buried under the lids of the rest of the cortex.
That feels so poetic, doesn't it? Especially considering what we're about to find out it actually does.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, the assumption was, okay, it's buried deep. Maybe it handles taste. Maybe some rumbling in the gut.
That was the prevailing theory, the visceral brain. It was just thought to be involved with basic bodily sensations, nothing more complex than that.
Right. But as we started looking through the stack of research for today, and it is a massive stack, the picture that emerges is completely different.
Yeah.
This isn't just a taste center. This hidden island might actually be the very thing that makes you.
It is certainly looking that way. The more we learn, the more we realize this is the switchboard for your attention.
Right.
It's the seat of interoception, which is the fancy word for how you feel your own body from the inside out. And it's this integration hub where your raw emotions collide with your logical decision-making.
The intersection of I feel and I do.
That's a great way to put it. It's precisely that intersection.
That is a huge claim, a really huge claim. And because of that, and because this region is so complex, we set a specific mission for this deep dive. We're going to map this island. We're going to look at the geography, the architecture, the networks that run through it, and what happens when it breaks. But you and I agreed on a very specific constraint for today's discussion.
We did. We wanted to be rigorous. Because the insula is currently a very hot topic in neuroscience, there's a lot of pop psychology speculation out there. We wanted to cut through that noise.
Exactly. So the rule is, we aren't just going to throw out theories or general ideas. Every single major claim we make today, we are going to back it up by citing the specific paper, the date it was published, and the title. We are showing our receipts.
It might make us sound a little bit like we're defending a thesis at times, but I think for this topic, it's absolutely necessary. We want you, the listener, to know exactly where this knowledge is coming from.
So if it sounds like we're being hyper-specific with names and dates, that's on purpose. We're building a map of the insula based on hard data. So with that, let's start with the lay of the land. We are explorers. We've pulled back those lids, the opercula. We're looking at the island of Riehl. What are we seeing? Is it just a smooth patch of gray matter?
Oh, far from it. When you expose the insula, the first thing you notice is that it's not a uniform blob at all. It has a very specific kind of rugged geography. And to really understand that structure, we have to look at a foundational paper in this field. It's from 2017, written by Lucina Q. Udden, and it's titled Structure and Function of the Human Insula.
Lucina Udden. Her name seems to be everywhere in this research stack.
She is a titan in this specific field, no question. And in that 2017 paper, and this is also corroborated by a very recent 2024 review by Vinod Menon called Insular Cortex, a hub for saliency, cognitive control, and interoceptive awareness. She describes this macroanatomy. The island is essentially divided in two.
Okay.
There's a deep groove running right down the middle of it called the central insular sulcus.
And a sulcus is just neurospeak for a groove or a fissure, right? Like a valley on a map.
Exactly, a valley. So the central insular sulcus splits the island into an anterior part, which is the front territory, and a posterior part, the back territory.
And do they look different?
They do, and here's the thing. They look physically different. The anterior insula is made up of three short gyres, or the bumps, the hills. So you have the anterior, middle, and posterior short gyri.
Okay, so I'm visualizing this. The front of the island is rugged, with three distinct little hills.
Right. And then you cross that central valley to the back to the posterior insula. This area is made of two long gyri, the anterior and posterior long gyri. So structurally, even with the naked eye, if you were a surgeon looking at this, you could see a clear difference between the front and the back of this region.
And as we're going to see, that front-to-back difference is basically the defining story of the insula. It's not just about the shapes of the bumps, it's about function. It's a journey from the back of the island to the front.
It really is.
But I want to zoom in even further. Let's go microscopic. If we took a sample of this tissue and put it under a microscope, does the cellular structure change as we go from back to front?
It does, and this is where the story gets really, really interesting for the biology nerds out there. We have to talk about cytoarchitecture, the cellular architecture. In a 2015 paper by Vita Droutman and her colleagues titled Roles of the Different Subregions of the Insular Cortex in Various Phases of the Decision-Making Process, they break down these cellular gradients.
Gradients. That word implies a slow change, right? A fading from one type to another.
Precisely. It's
Right.
not a hard border, it's a transition.
Yeah.
So in the posterior insula, that's the back part with the long gyri, you have what's called granular cortex.
Granular.
Like
grainy?
Exactly. Under a microscope, it looks very grainy because it is packed with these tiny neurons called granule cells. This structure is very similar to your sensory cortex, the parts of your brain that process touch and sound and sight.
Which makes a lot of sense, right? Because as we'll learn, the back of the insula is essentially a receiving station. It's built to catch data.
Correct. It's input heavy. But as you move forward on the island, rostrally towards the front of the brain, the structure starts to change. You go through this transitional zone called the dysgranular cortex, where those grainy layers start to fade away.
Okay, so it's getting less grainy.
And then you hit the anterior insula, and here the cortex becomes a granular. It lacks those granule layers entirely. It looks much more like the emotional and motor parts of the brain.
So physically, the island transitions from a sensing structure in the back to an integrating or maybe an acting structure in the front. The hardware literally changes to match the software.
Yes, but there is one specific cellular detail in that anterior insula, that a granular part, that we absolutely have to pause on because it's not just that it lacks granules, it possesses something else, a very special type of brain cell that is incredibly rare.
Wait, I remember reading this. These are the von Economo neurons, right?
The VNs, yes. And to get the details on this, we should turn to a 2019 paper by William Seeley titled The Salience Network, a neural system for perceiving and responding to homeostatic demands.
What makes these von Economo neurons so special? I mean, why do they get their own name? Most neurons don't.
A few reasons. First, their shape is completely different. Most neurons are pyramidal. They're shaped like little pyramids with lots of branches. VNs are large, spindle-shaped neurons. They're long and thin, and they are huge. In the world of neurons, size usually equals speed. These things are the Ferraris of the cellular world.
So they conduct signals very, very fast.
Extremely fast. And here's the kicker. In humans, they are found almost exclusively in the granular anterior insula, and one other place, the anterior cingulate cortex, nowhere else.
Okay, that's specific.
And if we look at evolution, they only seem to pop up in animals that we consider to be highly social and intelligent. We see them in humans, great apes, cetaceans, or whales and dolphins and elephants.
Mm-hmm. That is a fascinating lineup. Whales, elephants, humans, great apes. The common thread there has to be complex social structures.
Exactly. The running theory is that these neurons evolved for rapid social-emotional processing. Think about it. When you walk into a room and you instantly sense the vibe is off, or when you look at your partner's face and you just know they're upset before they even say a word, that speed, that intuitive leap,
Yeah.
that is likely the von Economo neurons firing. They allow us to take a massive amount of sensory information, body language, tone of voice, context, and intuitively, almost instantly synthesize it into a social or an emotional understanding.
So the anterior insula isn't just a granular, it's supercharged with these high-speed social processors. That explains why our gut feelings feel so instant. It's not a slow calculation, it's a lightning strike.
It is. So we have the geography anterior versus posterior. We have the architecture granular for receiving, a granular with VNs for processing. Now we need to overlay the function. Researchers have mapped this out into what they call a tripartite model, a three-part model.
And this comes up in that 2017 Udden paper again,
Yeah.
and also the Droutman 2015 paper on decision-making. They essentially divide the island into 3 functional territories. Let's walk through them one by one.
Sure. So territory number 1. The posterior insula, or PI, think of this as the sensorum motor hub.
Okay, so this is the back of the island, the granular part. What is plugging into this hub? What information is it getting?
It's wired up to the somatosensory cortices and the supplementary motor area. Its job is processing raw, objective data from the body, things like pain signals, temperature, touch, vestibular signals, which is your sense of balance, and also some basic auditory signals.
So when you burn your finger on a hot stove, the posterior insula is the part of this island that knows about it first. It's the raw feed.
It's the first stop. It gets the raw data, high temperature detected at fingertip.
Okay, so that's the back. Now we move forward. Territory 2, the ventral anterior insula. Ventral means towards the bottom, right?
Yes, the lower front part. This is the socio-emotional hub. It has connections deep into the limbic areas, the more primal parts of the brain, like the amygdala, the ventral striatum, the orbitofrontal cortex.
The emotional brain.
The emotional brain, exactly. So this area handles emotion, autonomic regulation, like controlling your heart rate and your breathing, and also chemosensation, which is just smell and taste.
So that's the feeling part. That's where the raw sensation from the back starts to get an emotional flavor. And finally, territory 3, the dorsal anterior insula, dorsal being towards the top.
Right, and this is the cognitive hub. This part connects up to the big players in executive function. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DACC, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC. This bit is involved in executive control, switching your attention, and higher level thinking.
It is just wild that all of this is happening on one little island. You have a sensor for pain in the back, a center for emotion in the bottom front, and a controller for thought in the top front.
All wired together. And that integration, that physical closeness of these 3 distinct functions, is what allows the insula to do its most famous job, the job that has really made it a celebrity in neuroscience over the last 15 years or so. It runs the salience network.
Okay, let's unpack this, because salience is a word that gets thrown around a lot in these papers, but I want to make sure I understand exactly what it means in this context. And to do that, we have to go back to the source, right? The paper that really put this network on the map.
That would be the 2007 paper by William Seeley and his colleagues titled Dissociable Intrinsic Connectivity Networks for Salience Processing and Executive Control. A bit of a mouthful, but a landmark paper.
This was a seminal moment, right? I mean, before this, we knew these areas existed, but we didn't realize they were a team, that they were all talking to each other constantly.
Exactly. Before 2007, we saw these different areas lighting up in fMRI scanners, but we thought of them as separate things. Seeley used a technique called independent component analysis, or ICA.
Can we break that down? Independent component analysis. That sounds terrifyingly technical.
It does, but the concept is actually pretty intuitive. Think of it like being at a cocktail party.
Okay.
You're in a room with 50 people all talking at once. It's just noise, a wall of sound. But if you put a very sensitive microphone in the middle of the room and run a specific algorithm on the recording, you can mathematically separate out the distinct conversations. You can isolate Dave talking to Sarah over by the window from Mike talking to Jane by the food table.
That's a great analogy.
ICA does that for brain activity. It looks at the noisy, chaotic mess of the whole brain firing at once, and it finds the distinct conversations, the networks of regions that are consistently firing together in sync.
So Seeley applied this cocktail party algorithm to the brain, and he pulled out one specific conversation that nobody had really isolated before.
He did. He found a network that was anchored by 2 main pillars: the orbital frontoinsula, which is our anterior insula, and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DACC. But it wasn't just those 2. This network dug deep into the subcortex. It included the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the ventral striatum, and the periaqueductal gray.
Wow. That is a heavy-hitting lineup. You've got the emotion center, the hormone and homeostasis center, the reward center, and the pain modulation center, all in one conversation.
All on the same conference call. And Seeley and his team had to ask, what are they all talking about? What is the function of this network? And they called it the salience network.
So what is salience?
The core concept here is that your brain is constantly, every second, bombarded by millions of bits of information. Sights, sounds, memories, the feeling of your clothes on your skin, the hum of the refrigerator, the thought of what you need to do tomorrow. You cannot possibly pay conscious attention to all of it.
You'd go crazy. You'd be completely paralyzed by the noise.
You would. So the brain needs a filter. It needs a bouncer at the door of your consciousness. It needs a system that can rapidly integrate all that sensory data with your internal visceral gut markers to decide what is relevant, what matters right now. That quality of mattering is salience.
So the salience network is the bouncer. It's the one that decides what gets into the club of your conscious attention. You, the itch on the leg. You stay out. You, the smell of smoke. You get in immediately.
Perfect analogy. And this leads us directly to the triple network model, which is discussed in incredible detail in that 2024 Menon Review paper we mentioned, and also in a 2023 paper titled The Role of the Salience Network in Cognitive and Affective Deficits.
The triple network model. Okay, this sounds like a sci-fi alliance or a geopolitical treaty. Who are the three big players?
Player one, the default mode network, or DMN. This is the network that's active when you're resting, daydreaming, thinking about yourself or your past, or just letting your mind wander. It's your internal world. It's where you go when you zone out.
Okay, so that's internal me time.
Right. Player two. The central executive network, sometimes called the frontoparietal network, or FPNCEN. This is active when you are focused on an external task, solving a math problem, navigating a map, learning a new skill, or listening intently to this deep dive. It's external and cognitively demanding.
And usually these two are anti-correlated, aren't they? When one is on, the other is off. You can't really effectively daydream and do long division at the exact same moment.
Exactly. They are like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other goes down. And that is where player three comes in, the salience network, the SN.
It's the person pushing the seesaw.
It is the operator of the seesaw. It is the switch.
Yep.
The anterior insula, as the hub of the salience network, detects a salient event, maybe a sudden loud noise outside, which is external, or a sharp pain in your stomach, which is internal. It detects this and it switches the brain's mode.
How does it do that?
It actively disengages the default mode network. It shuts down the daydreaming and simultaneously engages the central executive network, focusing your attention on the new important thing. It says, stop thinking about your vacation plans, there is a tiger in the room. Or, stop working on that spreadsheet, your stomach really hurts, you should pay attention to that.
So without the insula, without this switch, we would be stuck. We wouldn't be able to transition our focus effectively.
We would be profoundly unable to prioritize. We wouldn't know when to switch gears. We would either be trapped in our own heads while the world burned around us, or stuck staring at a wall, unable to reflect or plan. And that 2024 Menon paper makes a very specific point about how this happens. They used another complex analysis called Granger causality.
Okay, another term to unpack. Granger causality.
Think of this as figuring out who shouts at whom in the brain. If brain region A fires, does brain region B immediately jump into action a millisecond later? And if region B fires, does A just ignore it? If A consistently makes B jump, then we can say that A has causal influence over B. It's the boss.
So it maps the chain of command. Not just who's talking, but who's giving the orders.
Precisely. And what they found, which is just incredible, is that the right anterior insula acts as a causal hub. It has a high net causal outflow. That means it sends signals to the executive network and to the default mode network to coordinate this switch. It is the conductor of the orchestra. It's not just participating, it is actively directing the traffic.
That is an incredibly powerful role. For a region that's tucked away under a lid, it's basically directing traffic for the entire cortex. It's telling the CEO, the prefrontal cortex, when to get to work and when to take a break.
It is. And this switching mechanism is absolutely crucial for everything we do, but especially when it comes to making decisions. Because decision-making isn't just about cold, hard logic. It's about attention and feeling.
Which brings us perfectly to the next part of our map, decision-making. Because I think we all like to believe that we are these rational creatures. We make pro and con lists, we calculate odds. But the research on the insula tells a very, very different story, doesn't it?
A completely different story. And here we are going to lean heavily on that 2015 Droutman paper, the one titled Roles of the Different Subregions of the Insular Cortex in Various Phases of the Decision-Making Process. They propose a 4-phase model of decision-making, and what's just wild is that the insula is involved in every single step.
Okay, let's walk through the phases. Imagine I'm at a casino. I'm standing at the roulette wheel trying to decide what to do. Phase 1.
Phase 1, refocusing attention. So you're standing there, maybe looking at your drink, maybe thinking about your job, maybe you're in default mode. Suddenly, the croupier spins the ball. That sound, that movement, it's a salient event. The dorsal anterior insula, the DAI, and the ACC, the core of the salience network, they identify that a relevant event is happening. Hey, pay attention. A choice needs to be made. It switches your networks from default mode to executive.
Okay, so I'm locked in. I'm focused on the wheel. Now what? Phase 2.
Phase 2, evaluation. This is the juicy part. This is where you decide what to do. Do I bet on black 17? And this is where the insula brings in something called the somatic marker hypothesis.
Somatic markers. This is Antonio Damasio's famous idea, right? That feelings guide our choices.
It is, and the Droutman paper expands on it beautifully in the context of the insula. The idea is that when you face a choice, your brain doesn't just calculate probability like a computer. The insula reactivates the feeling of past similar situations. It literally brings back the somatic state, that gut clench you felt when you lost a big bet last time, or that rush of heat and excitement you felt when you won.
So it's not a memory of the event, it's a memory of the feeling. It biases the decision using a physical memory of an emotion.
Exactly. It uses your body as a reference library of past experiences. And specifically, the dorsal anterior insula seems to be critical for tracking risk. The paper mentions that high activation in the DAI often predicts risk aversion.
So if my insula is screaming, if it's generating a really strong bad feeling, I'm more likely to choose the safe option or just walk away.
That's the idea. So when you get that knot in your stomach that says don't do it, that is literally your dorsal anterior insula firing and sending that warning signal. It also tracks risk prediction error. So if you thought a bet was a sure thing and you lost, the insula lights up like a Christmas tree to update your internal model. Hey, that was riskier than you thought. Remember this feeling. It also tracked the valence. Was the outcome good or bad? And the magnitude. Did I lose $1 or did I lose my house?
So we have attended to the wheel and we have evaluated the risk with our gut. Phase 3.
Phase 3, action. This is the actual execution of the choice. Placing the chip on the table, the dorsal anterior insula is linked to the urge to act. But interestingly, the ventral anterior insula, the emotional part, seems to be involved in inhibiting action. So there's this push-pull dynamic within the island itself. One part says, go, do it, and the other part says, wait, hold back, let's think about this.
It's an internal tug of war, a debate happening on this one little island. And finally, Phase 4. The bet is made.
Phase 4. Outcome processing. The ball lands. You win or you lose. What happens in the brain? The insula is absolutely critical here, especially for something called error awareness.
Error awareness. Is that just, knowing you messed up?
It's more specific than that. The dorsal AI lights up like a beacon when you make an error, and you're aware of it. If you make a mistake but you don't realize it, the insula stays relatively quiet. But the moment you have that, oh, shoot, realization, it fires intensely.
And does it do anything else?
Yes, this activation is directly linked to autonomic arousal. The moment you realize your mistake, your insula drives the body's physical reaction. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate spikes, your palms might get sweaty.
It's making you feel the failure in your body so you remember it. It's tying the cognitive error to a physical sensation.
That's the key, so you don't make the same mistake again. And there's a really interesting point in that Droutman paper about the gambler's fallacy and what happens when the insula is damaged.
I love this part. This is about the coin flip theory.
So healthy people, you and me, we have all these cognitive biases. If we flip a coin and it comes up heads 10 times in a row, a healthy brain feels deep in its gut, tails is due, it has to be tails next.
Even though we know logically the odds are still exactly 50-50.
Right. It's totally irrational. That's the gambler's fallacy. Or there's the near miss effect, where getting 2 out of 3 cherries on a slot machine feels like you almost won, so it creates this powerful urge to play again immediately.
And what about people with insula damage?
They don't have these biases. The Droutman paper discusses how patients with insula lesions lose the gambler's fallacy. They treat each coin flip as a completely independent event. They can look at 10 heads in a row and say, the next one is 50-50, of course. No feeling, no urge.
So in a way, they're more logical. more rational.
Strictly speaking, from a purely mathematical standpoint, yes, they are more rational, but they lack that intuitive, emotional feel for the game. They don't get the urge to chase a loss or the thrill of a near miss. It shows just how much our gut instincts, even the irrational ones, are resident in this piece of tissue.
That is just wild. It really challenges the idea that being emotional makes you bad at decisions.
Yeah.
It seems like you need the emotion to even care about the decision at all, but then sometimes it can lead you astray.
It's a double-edged sword. You can't make good decisions without it, but it can also trick you.
So we've talked about how the insula helps us make decisions by using these gut feelings. But this leads to a more fundamental question. How does the insula generate these feelings in the first place? How does it even know what the gut is doing? This brings us to section 4 of our map, the body-mind interface. And the key concept here is interoception.
Interoception, a crucial term. It's defined clearly in that 2017 Udden paper as the sense of the physiological condition of the body. Most people know about exteroception, seeing, hearing, touching the outside world. Interoception is looking inward.
So it's not just hunger and thirst.
It's so much more. It's hunger, thirst, your heartbeat, the feeling of your bladder being full, the distension of your gut, the feeling of breathlessness, the tickle in your throat that makes you want to cough. It's the entire universe of sensations inside your skin.
And this brings us right back to that geography we talked about at the very beginning. Remember the anterior versus posterior split, the gradient.
Yes. The posterior to anterior gradient. This is described beautifully in both the 2024 Menon Review and the 2019 Seeley paper. It basically explains how you turn pure biology into psychology, how you turn a physical sensation into a subjective feeling.
Okay, walk us through the flow. Let's say I'm nervous and my heart starts beating fast.
Okay, so your heart rate speeds up. That raw physical signal travels up the vagus nerve and the spinal cord. It passes through the thalamus, the brain's relay station, and it lands first in the posterior insula. Remember, that's the granular part, the sensor.
So the back of the island gets the raw data feed. It sees something like heart rate equals 120 BPM. It's just objective data.
Exactly. It's a fact. The heart is beating fast. But then that information doesn't just stop there. It moves rostrally. It flows forward across the island towards the anterior insula. And as it moves, it gets integrated. It gets mixed with context from other brain areas. Am I giving a speech? Or did I just see a bear? It gets mixed with memory. It gets mixed with your current goals and motivations.
So it's like it's cooking the raw ingredients. It's adding spices and context.
That's a perfect way to put it. By the time that signal reaches the anterior insula, it isn't just heart rate 120 anymore. It becomes a subjective feeling state.
So heart rate 120 plus the context, bear, equals the subjective feeling of terror. But heart rate 120 plus the context, seeing my crush, equals the subjective feeling of excitement.
Precisely. The anterior insula is where the physics of the body becomes the feeling of the mind. I want to bring in something from a transcript of a conversation between Andrew Huberman and Jordan Peterson. It's called Neuroscience Meets Psychology. Huberman describes this perfectly. He says the insula is reporting on the nature of bodily states to the prefrontal cortex in a manner that allows us to be consciously aware of our body states.
It is the bridge. It's the official translator between the body and the conscious mind.
It connects, I feel a rapid heartbeat, which is the physical sensation, to I am anxious, which is the emotional label. Without that translation, you might have the physical reaction, your heart might race, but you wouldn't feel the emotion of anxiety in the same conscious, self-aware way. You'd just be a machine with a fast motor.
And it's not a one-way street, right? The insula doesn't just sit there and listen to the body like a stenographer. It talks back.
No, it absolutely regulates it. This is autonomic regulation. That 2017 Udden paper notes that if you electrically stimulate the insula in a patient during brain surgery, you can actually alter their heart rate and blood pressure directly. And there's a specific lateralization, a side difference that's quite interesting.
Yeah, versus right insula.
Yes. The right insula is often linked to the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system. Stimulation there tends to speed things up, increase arousal. The left insula seems more linked to the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system. Stimulation there tends to slow things down.
So the insula listens to the heart, interprets what the heartbeat means in context, and then tells the heart what to do next. Okay, heart, you can calm down now. It was just a false alarm.
It is a constant feedback loop, a homeostatic loop. It's always trying to keep you balanced and responding appropriately to the world.
Okay, so we have established that this hidden island is doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting. It's switching our attention, filtering the world, helping us make decisions based on risk, and literally creating our subjective feelings of emotion from raw body data.
Yeah.
But Machines break. Biological machines break. What happens when the network master malfunctions?
This is Section 5, Dysfunction and Pathology. And because the salience network is so central to how we experience reality, when it breaks, the consequences are severe and often devastating. It's not like losing your sense of smell, it changes your entire reality. Let's start with schizophrenia.
This is discussed in that 2023 paper, The Role of the Salience Network in Cognitive and Affective Deficits, and also in the 2019 Seeley paper. Schizophrenia is often misunderstood by the public as split personality, but that's not at all what it is.
No, not at all. Modern neuroscience increasingly describes schizophrenia as a failure of predictive coding, and specifically a fundamental failure of the salience network. Remember, the insula's main job is to tag things as relevant. It puts a spotlight on things that matter and lets the rest fade into the background.
Right. It's the bouncer.
In schizophrenia, the insula starts misattributing salience. It starts tagging the wrong things as important. It lets the wrong things into the club.
Give me an example of what that would feel like.
Imagine you're sitting in a quiet room. There's a faint hum from the air conditioner. Your brain normally effortlessly filters that out. It's not salient, it's just background noise. But if your salience network is broken, it might suddenly tag that hum as critically important. It might feel like a message. It might feel intentional, like it's meant for you. The pattern on the wallpaper might suddenly seem to hold a secret code.
And what about something like hearing voices?
This is the most disturbing part. We all have an inner voice. You can hear yourself thinking right now. Your brain, your insula, knows that voice comes from you. It correctly tags it as internal. But in schizophrenia, the insula fails to make that distinction. It mistags your own internal thought as a salient external voice.
So you hear a thought, but your brain insists with the same certainty that I know you're speaking to me right now, that the voice is coming from outside your head.
Exactly. That is the proposed mechanism of auditory hallucinations. It's a profound tagging error. And structurally, these papers note that in patients with schizophrenia, there's often reduced gray matter volume in the insula and reduced connectivity between the salience network and the default mode network. The switch is broken and the filter is broken.
That is just terrifying. It really shows how fragile our grip on reality is. It completely depends on this little island tagging things correctly.
It really does. Now let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Not a broken filter, but a filter that's working overtime. Let's talk about anxiety and PTSD. In anxiety and PTSD, the salience network isn't necessarily tagging internal things as external. It is just chronically overactive. The 2015 Droutman paper and the 2023 review both discuss this. The switch is too sensitive. It's hypervigilant. It's tagging non-threatening stimuli as dangerous.
So you're walking down the street, a car backfires, and instead of your insula saying just a car, ignore it, it screams, danger. That's a threat. Switch to fight or flight mode. Now.
Exactly. And it's not just for big things. It could be a weird look from a stranger or the tone of an email. The dorsal anterior insula activation is chronically high. It never really powers down to a restful baseline. And interestingly, studies show that high baseline DI activation correlates with personality traits like neuroticism and harm avoidance.
So if you're a worrier, if you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, you probably have a very, very busy anterior insula.
It's the overprotective friend who sees danger lurking around every single corner.
Yes. And finally, we have to talk about what happens when you lose this function, when there's a lesion. We have to talk about addiction. Because there's a story here that is one of my absolute favorites in all of neuroscience. It's referenced in the 2015 Droutman paper, referring to foundational work by Naki and others.
The smoking study.
The smoking study. It's unbelievable.
It changed everything about how we think about cravings. So researchers were looking at a group of patients who had suffered strokes. These patients were all heavy, long-term, chain-smoking cigarette addicts before their stroke.
Packs a day for decades.
Right, and they had strokes that caused damage in various parts of the brain. But the researchers started noticing something really weird about the small subgroup of patients who specifically had damage to the insula.
What happened to them?
They woke up from the stroke and they just didn't smoke anymore. One patient famously said, "My body forgot the urge to smoke."
My body forgot the urge. Not, I decided to quit.
Exactly. Think about that phrasing. They didn't say, "I'm using my willpower." They didn't say, "It's hard, but I'm trying." They just stopped. No cravings, no withdrawal agony, no irritability. They could be in a room full of smokers and feel absolutely nothing.
Because the insula is what generates the urge in the first place.
Right. Go back to phase 3 of that decision model, the urge to act. The insula is what integrates the physical withdrawal pangs from the body with the emotional desire and the learned habit. It combines them to create that powerful, all-consuming, I need this feeling. If you knock out the insula with a stroke, you might still have the physical chemical dependency in your blood for a while, but the subjective feeling of the craving, the psychological suffering is gone.
That is just profound. It implies that addiction isn't just a chemical hook in your brainstem, it's a constructed feeling state, a story told by the anterior insula.
It suggests that the insula is the very seat of the craving itself. Without the island, the physical symptoms don't translate into a psychological compulsion.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. We've mapped the mountains of the short Jiri, the valleys of the sulcus, the superhighways of the salience network. We've looked at how it switches our attention, how it literally creates our gut feelings, and what happens when it misfires. As we wrap up, how do we synthesize all of this? If you had to give the insula a job title on a business card, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think I would call it the comparator and the controller.
Unpack that for me, comparator and controller.
Well, it acts as a comparator because it is constantly, from millisecond to millisecond, comparing what you expect to happen, your brain's prediction of the world, with what is actually happening in your body and out in the world. And when there's a mismatch, that's a prediction error.
This doesn't feel the way I thought it would.
Exactly. And then it acts as the controller by taking that error signal and switching your brain networks to handle the new reality. It is the absolute interface where the homeostatic feeling body meets the cognitive thinking mind.
And to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought, something for them to chew on as they go about their day. The 2019 Seeley paper on the Salience Network touches on something pretty deep.
Yes. The C word. Consciousness. If the anterior insula is the specific place in the brain where these raw homeostatic feelings, the sense of having a living, breathing, pulsing body, are integrated with the will to act or agency and with social awareness, William Seeley and other neuroscientists like A.D. Bud Craig have suggested that this specific integration might be the biological seat of sentience.
Not just intelligence, the actual feeling of being alive.
Exactly. Not just processing information like a computer. A computer can process data about its internal state, its temperature or battery level, but we don't think the computer feels like it's processing data, that I am here, I am feeling this sensation, that core of selfhood. That might just be the hum of your anterior insula listening to your heart and telling your frontal lobe, hey, we're here, we're alive.
That is a heavy, beautiful thought. So the next time you feel a butterfly in your stomach, or a sudden unexplained urge to check your phone, or just a quiet moment of clarity, take a second. Don't just ignore it as noise. That is your hidden island, the island of real, speaking to you.
That's your insula online.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.
Pleasure as always.